Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in the second session for today. Your hosts for now are Quentin and Eigo.
Do I have a mic? Yeah. Welcome everyone to this session on what's new in Business Central clients for AL developers. My name is Quentin. I'm part of the team working on the AL compiler and all the development tools. And I will be hosting this session with my colleague Eigo.
Yes, hi, I'm Eigo Kawatani. I work in the client runtime team for BC, so this is the team that works for web client.
So during this session, we will show you some client improvements that we did over the last releases. We'll then show you some improvements that we did specifically on actions. And then we'll show you how we decided to restructure the whole action bar for AL pages. We'll show you then the new AL promoted model. We'll show you all the new capabilities that we got out of it, both in the application and in the client. And finally, we'll walk you through how we made this seamless transition for you as developers, but also for your users.
All right, so I can start with improvement we did in the control add-in. So one of the problems we had with control add-in was that it was possible for developers to write really bad code. So here you see an example where it makes a callback request over server every 10 seconds. But it could be that there's a control add-in that does it every 1 second or less. And we actually had a case, a customer case, where they were complaining that the BC was running slow. And we found out it was because there's a control add-in making tons of requests in a very short amount of time, and that was slowing down Business Central. So I can show you how would that look like. So imagine there's a control add-in that does exactly that. So this is making a request to our server, but then without waiting for the reply for this callback, it makes tons of requests in a short time. But server still needs to process that, and then it will send the result back, and it needs to do it one by one. And what's bad about this is that the callback requests from the control add-in, they are processed in the same event queue that we use for user interactions, such as saving data or activating views. So you can already imagine if there are tons of requests like this, it will slow down Business Central. And we try to improve this, and how we did it is this. So let's say you have the same add-in making a lot of requests, but now we added an internal queue for this control add-in. So this one will make sure the request is sent one by one. So we send a request, and then the result will be processed and sent back. Then we process the next one. So by separating the queues, now we can have the event queue for the user interactions separated from it, so BC can run faster and keep running smoother. So there's some notes I want to make about the internal queue. So when the queue reaches 20, we start displaying this warning dialog. So we can do that, then user can notice this and potentially let developer know about it so they can catch these issues before the control add-in gets propagated to more customers. But just a quick note, but these numbers are internal, so we may adjust it in the future, but this is the numbers we have. And if the queue reaches 50, then we actually start ignoring these new messages. And so that's a new thing, that callback requests can get ignored. So we actually extended the invoke extensibility method API, and there's a new callback that you see there, which gets called if a request fails or ignored. And there is a good Microsoft documentation on this, so I suggest you to take a look.
So the next topic that we'd like to mention here, or the next feature, are list views. So list views have actually been around in Business Central for a few releases, but we felt it would be good to remind you about the capabilities that they offer, since there is some real value for your users. So what are list views? They're allowing you to define an alternative representation of the data on the page. So you can filter and sort the data, but you can also do some UI customization so that you can emphasize what is the most relevant for the user in this view. You're defining them directly in AL in your pages, in your page extensions and page customizations. So you can have them directly from your pages, but you can also decide to extend the base application, for instance, and define your custom views. So those views, they're available in the client and then can be customized further by users. You can access them directly from this dropdown, or you can also change view in this section from the filter pane. And their users have the ability to modify the filters, create their own views, create copy of your existing view, and they can customize it further. If we look at how this is under the hood in the AL code, we have a new views section here that you have on your pages of type list. And there you can define your view as a set of different properties. So here we have a caption that is set. We also have some filters that are defined, but also another property that is here allowing you to set sorting direction on one or multiple fields. This one didn't have any UI customizations, and that leads us to the next topic related to views. We're distinguishing between two different types of views in Business Central. So we have views with shared layouts, which are views that are just sharing the same layout as the default view all, which is the view that is opened automatically when you're opening a page. And on this view, all the user personalizations and profile configurations are applied automatically, the same way they're applied on the default view. The second type of views are views with their own custom layout, so you can then define in code how the layout should look like. And those ones are not subject to user personalization and profile configurations. If we look now at a view that has a custom layout, you can see that the view also here has some properties to filter and so on, but it also has a dedicated layout section. And in this section that is very similar to what you would have in a page extension or page customization, you can reorder fields, and you can also modify some of their properties, such as the visibility. And in this example here, I'm moving first the name and balance, and then we have the phone number that is hidden because it doesn't appear as relevant to the user. So this is how you can leverage views.
So next, I want to present one improvement we did for the data entry for the grid. So we had a problem with entering multiple rows very fast. We previously made some improvements for multiple columns in the same row, but the problem here is that we had only 3 draft rows. So if you were entering a lot of rows quickly, you could quickly run out of these rows, and you had to fill those up before you can enter new rows. So this one can show how that would look. So you have 3 draft rows there, and if you're entering row one by one, that's okay. So let's just say you entered 1 row, then we'll ask the server to create another row to fill up the number of draft rows. So if you're doing that one by one, that is great, it works fine. But if you are entering rows really fast, and you can see in this case, you made a lot of rows, 3 at once, and then you run out of draft rows. So what we used to do, we still need to ask the server to fill up these new draft rows. So you have to wait for the reply to come back before you can enter new rows. So that was causing some performance issues for some users. The way we improve this is to increase the number of draft rows to 15. So that's what we do, but we still show only 3 in the UI. So I can go through the same scenario that I just showed you with this. So if you do 1 row at a time, that is still the same. We will ask for the callback to the server, and then you get a reply, and then you update the UI. So that's the same. But then let's say you enter 3 rows at once, really fast. Now at this point, we know that we have still 12 rows available. So we used to ask the server, but now we don't do that. We don't need to do this because we know there are still draft rows available. So we can update the UI in the browser side without contacting the server. Then after that, we still need to ask the server for more rows, but since the UI was updated in the browser side, user can continue entering more rows really fast. Okay, so now we would like to go through some of the improvements we did for Action.
So the first improvement that we'd like to show here is related to scope repeater actions. So those are the actions that appear directly on the rows of your list pages. And we're showing you here a snippet of code that defines an action with scope repeater, as you can see with the scope repeater property. And we'll ask you now, what is wrong with this action? And well, the answer is that you actually needed the action to also be promoted in order for it to always appear on the page. And that wasn't something the compiler would let you know about. We had it in the documentation, but since the compiler wasn't warning you about it, there were, I think, quite some chances that some of your apps might be impacted then. So we decided to fix that. For version 20 and earlier, the behavior remains the same, so those scope repeater actions needs to be promoted. but we're introducing a new UI cop rule that will let you know that you have to use the promoted action, and that will be, of course, version depending on the versions of Business Central you're targeting. And for version 21, we have fixed it so that the scope repeater actions are just displayed independently of the promoted state of the action.
Yeah, so next we have the split button. So I'm sure you saw this in the keynote already, but now we have split button in BC. Split button is not a new concept that we invented. It's a common UI component that's used across different products. So for example, this is one from the Outlook. So there's one called new email that you can click on this button to invoke the action associated with it, or you can click on the drop-down arrow, then this will show other related items. So we can do this now in BC, and the way you do it is to have a group of actions, and then there's a new property called show as, and you need to set that to split button. Then the first visible and enabled action from the group will be used as the primary action of the split button. So in the screenshot you see there's a post action being shown as a primary action. You can click on it to invoke the action, or you can click on the drop-down arrow, which will reveal all the actions inside the group.
So the next topic that we'll mention is a topic that you've seen during the keynote. There was also a dedicated session earlier today, but it's related to Power Automate. Power Automate allows you to create automated workflows between products without writing any code. And among those products, you also have Business Central, for which we have a set of connectors that you can use. One of the main changes you'll see in this release is that the Power Automate flows associated to a page are automatically discovered and available in Business Central. And you also have the ability to customize those and move them around on your page to put them where you think they fit best. So in order to do this, we had to have some language support for it. So we're introducing a new concept that is named custom actions, and that we will use to trigger actions outside of Business Central. And right now you have the ability to define then actions of type flow. If we look at how the code looks like, here I'm adding a custom action to the customer card that points to some flow. There is a custom action type that is set to flow right now. So in the future, we'll reuse that concept when we define other scenarios. And then you have some properties that are dedicated to Power Automate flows, so you can get this information from Power Automate and then fill in the flow ID and the environment ID where the flow is located. And that's how the runtime will know how to trigger the flow. If you want to know more about this, there was a session earlier today about empowering citizens and pro AL developers to do more with Power Platform. And we'll then recommend you to have a look at the recording when it becomes available.
All right. So now we'd like to introduce you the new action bar syntax we implemented for the fall release. But before doing that, I think it's the best to explain how the action bar is made today. So here you see a very typical action bar in Business Central, and there are two parts to it. There's one on the right-hand side here. We sometimes also call it the action repository. So this is where all the actions you define in AL, including groups, will show up by default. So you can have nested groups and all the actions. They will show up here. And we also have ones on the left. These are, we call it them promoted actions. And these are actions that are promoted from the right-hand side. And you have up to 20 promoted category groups where you can put these actions into. And in AL code, this is how you would used to look. So you could change the caption of the promoted categories using this property. And to promote an action, you had to set the promoted property to true. And by default, a promoted action goes into the new category, but you can change that using this promoted category property. And we also have this promoted is big, which was a legacy property we inherited from the Windows client's UI, ribbon UI. And this you could use this to change the ordering of actions. And we also have promoted only, which was the property used to show actions only on the left-hand side. But you can probably see, but promoted actions are created implicitly because you're not really telling the AL code where the action will show up. So you had to set the property to true, and then the client, us, will render it at the right place. So this had several limitations and restrictions. For example, it was not possible to choose the exact ordering of the promoted actions because you could only specify where it goes into the category, but you couldn't choose the ordering. And You could also not create new categories. You had only up to 20 of them, and it was not possible to reorder those categories either. Another one is that you couldn't create any subgroups within those categories. And because of these language limitations, we also had some confusing experiences in the client, in Client Designer. So you couldn't drag these promoted categories around. Also, you couldn't change the ordering of the actions within a promoted category. So on top of this, we started to get very complicated pages. So for example, our customer code has literally more than 100 actions. And it was getting hard for us to create a very well-organized and user-friendly action bar that can adapt to different scenarios. So we thought about maybe extending our ideas of the action repository concept. So we could maybe have one place where we have a bunch of actions defined on the page, and you can select actions from there to the left-hand side. And having references maybe was a good idea because you can have ways to have multiple promoted actions in different places in the same page, which will allow you to have more flexible and then comprehensive layout of actions.
So those are the challenges that we faced with the previous model using promoted properties. And in order to solve those, we've introduced some new concepts in the action bar in AL. So the first one is that we have now a new area that is named the promoted area, and that explicitly represents the left side of the action bar. And that one can contain groups and references to actions. The second concept then is the new ActionRef syntax, and that is a new construct that is representing a reference to an action. They can only be defined in the promoted area, and they will inherit most of their property from the target action. Since they're just a reference and we don't want to have code duplication, they're inheriting everything there. Only the visibility can be customized. So we'll now move to Visual Studio Code and have a quick demo of how the experience looks like editing those new actions. So I have a page here that is a pretty simple one. It has a group with some actions. And as you can see, none of them are promoted here. If I wanted to promote them, I could use the old model, but then I would have some limitations around where I'm defining them, and it's not really matching my needs. So I'll just start by writing a new area here. And as soon as I write, I get IntelliSense suggesting me that there is a new area named promoted. So I'll just use that. And now I want to create a reference to my action. So I'll use the snippet to create a new actions. And I have now to specify a name for it. So I'll just name it ActionRef1 because I want to keep things pretty simple here. And then if I move to the other part here, I have to enter which action I want to point to. And here I can specify either an action or a custom action that we presented before. But if I use IntelliSense, you'll see that the suggestions are already tailored for that, and I only have actions and custom actions suggested, but no groups or separators. So I'll just use action1 here. And then again, if I use IntelliSense to see which properties are available for me, I can see that the visibility is mentioned and the properties related to obsolescence. None of the other ones are there because they're all inherited from the target. So I'll just set the visibility explicitly to true, which is also the default value. And at this point, you'll realize that we're already doing something that wasn't possible in the old model, because now we have an action ref that is defined directly in the promoted section, so as a top-level action. But if I wanted to create a group or a category in the old namings, I can easily do it. I just create the group syntax the exact same way I would do it on the other action categories. And once I am in this group, I have the ability to define action refs. And then, since I am explicitly defining them, I can choose in which order they appear. Here I have first an action ref for action 2 and then action 3, but I could just change them and define how I think they should appear in the UI. Also, since these new categories are defined as groups, they are much more customizable than before. The promoted categories could only have their caption updated, but now I get a whole range of new properties that I can set on them. And I just use here the split button one that was just shown earlier. Now, since this is a group, I can also have other groups defined. So I can create a nested group and have here another action ref pointing to my remaining action. So if I just take this app that I published already and show it in Business Central, you'll see that I have my top level action showing here. I have here my group with the split button, and I have here the actions under it, and then my nested group. So that unlocks much more capabilities for you when you're defining those. If I go back now to the presentation, we can have a summary of the capabilities between the two models. So for the promoted models, we were limited to 20 categories, and we couldn't create new ones. That's something that is fixed now. I can explicitly reorder them. I can define subcategories if I want to. They are much more customizable. I can do other things than just changing the caption. I can order the action ref exactly how I want them, and I can even define them as top-level actions. So that shows the new capabilities we're getting now. One thing to mention, though, you cannot mix the promoted action syntax and the action ref syntax within the same object. So if you're defining a page or a page extension, you have to choose. Either you're still using the old syntax or you're moving forward. But you can have objects using the action ref syntax and some other objects using the promoted syntax within the same extension. So now Eigo will present you how we made them work side by side.
Yeah, so as Quentin just explained, you cannot mix the V1 syntax, which is the promoted action syntax, and the V2, which is the action ref syntax. But you can use whichever format you want to use for your extensions, and the base page can be either in V1 or V2, so you can have them side by side. And this is possible because V1 pages are converted for you into the V2 format under the hood, so you don't need to worry about which format that you have. So I can show you that in demo. So, all right, so let's say there's a page that you don't own. This is a page written in a V1, and you can see that the some actions are has promoted, and it has promoted is big, and so on. And you decided to write an extension on this V1 page. And since you like the action ref syntax, you decided to write this in V2 format, which you can do. So here I'm just changing the ordering of the promoted categories. This is something else you couldn't do before. You already noticed that these name of groups are created for you automatically. So if I try to start typing, you can actually see these promoted category groups are there for you to use. So this one really shows you that the V1 page was converted under the hood. And I can also move action around to the root level. So this one shows you the action 1, which is underscore promoted. This is the name of the promoted action that they generated for you. So the base action was called action 1 over here, but there's a promoted version of this over there, so you can already use this to make your extension. But you can also target the base action if you want to do that. You still have access to the action 2. This is the base action, one of the base actions you see there, and you can change the caption, and that's great, you can do that. So this is an example of how you can write a V2 extension on top of a V1 page. But let's say the owner of this page decided to uptake the new syntax now, so they wanted to convert this page into V2. So the one way you can do is to use a code action we added. Code action is a Visual Studio Code feature that you can use to invoke some actions when you execute it. And Quentin will show after this more about this, but I'm just going to use this for now to convert this page into the V2 format. So you can click on this, and now the page is converted into V2 already. So I can maybe show you that in the Git diff, so it's easy to see what changed. So you can see that all the promoted related categories are removed. For example, the name of the categories are not there anymore, but instead groups are created with the caption you specified. And for the promoted actions, they are removed, and then action refs are created. And if you pay attention to the promoted is big property, so these two, action 1 and action 2, were promoted into the same category, but the second action had promoted is big. So you would expect that the action 2 comes before action 1, and that's exactly what's happening here. So you see the action 2 first and action 1. But there's one thing to be aware of if you are converting your V1 page into V2 format. In order to not break any dependent extensions extending your page, you need to use this naming conventions that we created. So for promoted categories, you want to use the category underscore and name of the category. So in this case, the process. And then for action ref, you want to use the name of the action underscore promoted. So by using this convention, you can make sure that any dependent extensions will continue to work. So if you remember how the extension we created looked like, it was already using these naming conventions over here. So that's great, but we actually added an app source scope rule, so you can notice this if you didn't name your ActionRefs or promoted categories properly. So let's say I didn't use this naming convention, but use something like action1ref, then yeah, there's an error that you get here saying that action1 underscore promoted is not found, so it's telling me that some dependent extensions may break. So this is a way that you can use to make sure that the extensions will not break on your page. Yeah, and then this is just a summary of how a valid conversion should look like. For promoted actions, you should use the name of the action underscore promoted. And for promoted categories, we have the category underscore promoted.
So you've already seen that you can rely on some tooling that we're proposing you in Visual Studio Code to make sure that your conversion is done properly. And we've seen how that works on one page. But when you're converting an app, you have usually more than one, and you're using these promoted properties in a lot of them. So in the next demo, we'll show you how we decided to leverage some of the capabilities that Visual Studio Code offers with code actions and improve them so that we actually can offer you now the ability to fix multiple pages at once. So as you can see here, I have opened the system application for Microsoft, and I have a version here of the system application that is using promoted properties. So you see that I have quite some of them. If I go now to Visual Studio Code and use the light bulb that was shown before, you can see that we have now different scopes that are appearing. We can run the code action either on one specific instance or on all of them in the same document. So if you're using different page objects in the same document, which isn't really a great practice, but we would support that too. And you can do it on a project, and even more interestingly, on the workspace level. So if you have multiple projects loaded together in Visual Studio Code, you can also apply it there. So if I run this, I should see that now all my pages have been converted. Let me just reload the environment. So I have the promoted properties. I will just select one page here and run through the code action. And then what you would see, we'll jump to Git, is that I'll have the same kind of changes done as what Eigo presented earlier. So just need a bit of time for the workspace to finish loading and get another chance for running that. We added this capability here for this specific action for the conversion, but that's not the only case you'll see it. We have added it also on the UI, on the code cop rule for a missing parenthesis. And in the future, we'll be adding it to more code actions that are available through Visual Studio Code. So this takes a bit of time. I think we might just move forward. So we'll show you another demo at the of it if we have some time at the end. But you have the ability to run it on different scopes. And we actually used this to convert the system application and brought it to the latest format. And we did it not only on the system application, but also on the base application. And that allowed us to have also the chance for making further improvements in the base app. So now it actually worked. If I save all the files here and I go to Git, you can see that all of them were converted the exact same way as when one page was converted. So removing all the promoted properties and using the ActionRef here. So if we go back now to the presentation, we have converted the base application, but then we also took the chance to do a lot of improvements there. Whether they're in the client or in the application itself, we could leverage the new syntax that we had. And we have here a comparison between the sales order action bar in version 20 and version 21. And you can notice some things already. So when you open it now, the action bar will be automatically pinned so that you can get access to the most important actions in one click. We've also, as mentioned during the keynote, used the telemetry that we had in order to reorder the actions based on the usage that we've seen, and in order to have them in a more consistent way. We've also cleaned up the top promoted categories that you can see here and decided to move some of them as subcategories so that they make the most sense for you. We've also decided to leverage the use of split buttons so that now you can also access the actions within those subcategories with one click. And we've decided to merge the entity group, so here there's appearing as order, and the navigate group, because they had some kind of overlapping and similar meaning and created some confusions for users that were coming to Business Central. Finally, the last thing you'll see on this slide is that we're automatically renaming the process category to home so that we're providing an experience that is more in line with other Microsoft products. So with all of this, we're aiming at making it simpler for you to navigate the action bar, but also we're trying to improve the consistency of the action bar across different pages in the product. In version 20, you can see that the top categories were already kind of aligned. But then if you look at the action within them, that was pretty different from one page to another. And users then might have had to relearn how to use each page. With version 21, taking the same 3 pages as before, we can see that the top categories are much more similar. Then, of course, there are some changes that are specific for each of the pages. But also the actions themselves then are appearing in the same orders with the same split buttons at the same places and so on, so that when users are used to a page, they can just move to the next one easily.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the AO improvements. So now I want to show you some of the client improvements and capabilities. So it's a good news that the action bar personalization will continue to work with the new model. Now it's actually more powerful because you can drag categories around and you can nest the groups and move actions to the root level. You can do all that now. And another improvement we made is one UX improvement. So in previous releases, we had some actions that could be removed and some action that could be hidden. And it was really confusing to see why we had this difference. You really had to understand how the promoted actions worked in AL, and the regular users couldn't possibly figure this out. So in this case, remove was actually setting promoted only to true. So this implies this action is already promoted somewhere else. And then hide was setting visible to false. So this was very confusing. So in version 21, we made it consistent so that the remove will always remove the action or action ref from the current extension you're designing, and hide will set visible property to false. And I also want to spend a bit time discussing about the promoted only a little bit. So in the new action bar syntax, we no longer have the concept of promoted only, and we wanted to treat all the promoted actions by promoted only by default. And this is by design because we wanted to let users focus on the promoted section, so they spend less time on the repository area to find their actions. So we actually added several UI capabilities to do this, so user can start focusing more on the left-hand side. So here's one of them we did. So if you have a group of actions that are all promoted, in this case you have a group there, and then both of the actions are promoted, we no longer render this on the right-hand side because you already have them available on the left-hand side. So this is a screenshot that you see there. You can see that there are no actions on the right-hand side. So this is one change we did so that we can reduce the clutter and let users focus more on the left-hand side. There's another UI capability we added. So if a group has some promoted actions, in this case you have 3 actions and 2 of them are promoted and the last one is not, and if you render this, this is how it will look. We will still render the group. There's a posting group there. And directly under this group, you have a list of unpromoted actions inside the group. And then for promoted actions, we added a system group called other that you can see here. And we hide the promoted actions into this group. So a user will need to have one extra click to get to those. So this is a way for us to encourage users to focus more on the left-hand side. And here you can turn off the use short menu if you don't like the other, so you can have a list of actions in the same group. So I can show you some of this in the demo. All right, so here's a sales invoice document, and I can show you how you can now drag actions around at the root level. So you can have the invoice group and change the ordering of the groups, which you couldn't do before. And you can also open the group and change the ordering of this action. This is also new. You can even decide to nest the group into another one, so you can take this and then put it into the invoice group. So that's new. And lastly, I want to show you about the other menu UI. So this group has 3 unpromoted actions, and you have the bunch of promoted actions into the other menu. We also added a tooltip so that the user can learn what this menu is used for. So let's try to start hiding these actions, because now this attaches PDF is the last visible action which is not promoted inside this group. And if I hide this or move this out of this posting group, then all the actions in there will be promoted. So in that case, the posting group will be hidden. So I can try to maybe move this out of the posting group. So now you notice that the posting group is now grayed out. So this is indicating that it will be hidden. And that's because all the visible actions are promoted somewhere else. So then if I exit personalizations, there will be no more posting group. So this way we can reduce the clutter more on the right-hand side. So let's go back to the slide. So yeah, we talked a lot about how AO developers can update the new syntax and then transition into the new one. But since I just demoed some capability in the UI capability changes that will affect the current users. So I want to also discuss a bit about how users can transition into the new layout. So for that, we added a feature flag called Modern Action Bar, and this is disabled for existing users who are upgrading to version 21, but for new users, we enabled it by default so they can get the shiny layout. So I can explain more about what this flag does, but basically when it's on, you get the full action bar experience, but when it's off, we turn off or revert some of the features we did, the ones that has the most UI impact, so that users who are used to the old layout continue to see the same looking action bar. So here's the feature management page. And you can actually find a link that says try it out. So user can actually click on this and then see if they like the feature or not. So that's easy for them to do. So here's one feature that we try to revert when the feature flag is set to off. So as Quentin showed earlier, we decided to nest some promoted categories in the version 21. So for example, here you see the release and post actions being nested inside the process or home group. But this is a change in the layout. So in version 21, if you have the feature flag set to off, we will move any nested promoted categories back to the root. So you see the one that's above in the screenshot there. So this looks like what it used to be before. And here's another thing we do. So let me just explain a scenario. So here you have a group that's hidden, and inside here you have an action which is promoted, has a promoted equals true. So in version 20, you will still see the promoted action on the left-hand side. And that's because the way we created the promoted action was by taking a copy of the base action and then put it into the left-hand side. So it was no longer under a hidden group when it was moved to the left side. But in version 21, we have ActionRefs, and the visibility of ActionRef depends on the visibility of the base action. So in version 21, you will not see this action. And that would be a break-in change. So again, if you have the feature flag turned off, even with this layout in this AO code, you will still see the action promoted in the left-hand side.
And for those, we have also added UI cop rules, so that if you're in these situations in your extensions, by enabling the UI cop, you will get some additional information about this pattern being used and the fact that we're changing the behavior at runtime. So the other thing that is impacting user is not just the layout of the page, the action bar on their pages as such, but also all the customizations that they did over time, because you and your users might have customized the pages, and this might have used also the promoted properties. And as we've seen before, we cannot mix the promoted syntax with the ActionRef syntax. So we had to find a way to convert all the different types of personalizations that you can do in the client in Business Central. For user personalization, we've defined a fully automated experience. So the customizations, which are stored also as AL code, will be automatically converted. This will reuse some of the internals of the code action that you see in VS Code, so everything is tied together. And that will be something that should go totally unnoticed for the users. It should just work out when they start using their environments in version 21. For profile customization, same experience. The conversion is also totally automated. We're also doing it on import. So if you have exported some profiles that have promoted syntax and you're importing them on your new environment, they're converted automatically to the latest syntax. Since we know that some of you are keeping their profiles under source control and are editing them in VS Code, we've then decided to add some extra information during the import process, but also started to add partner telemetry for those so that you can get a summary of the operations that were done on your code. For the designer mode that you have, that is available in sandboxes, or that you can get by publishing your extensions from VS Code and starting the designer in this extension context, we've defined a one-click conversion. So if you're starting from VS Code, you have the ability to use the code actions that we just shown earlier. But if you're also publishing now an extension that has some pages in the promoted syntax, you'll see in the web client that you have this lock icon here. And that one will prevent you from customizing the page, but if you just click on it, you'll have the opportunity to convert your page automatically. So just to show you now a short demo of how the experience looks like when you're importing profiles. You have here your profile zip that contains different customizations, and some of those customizations you have here some promoted properties. If you take this to Business Central and then run through the import profile feature, you'll get through the wizard here, and you'll have a warning that is reported. The import is successful, but there is a warning. So let's see what that one says. If we look at it, it tells you that the runtime has detected the usage of duplicated constructs and has converted them to the latest syntax. So you have here information about the conversion. As mentioned, we've also added partner telemetry signals so that you can have another way of tracking this down. And we are showing you here as well all the additional telemetry that we added for profile configuration in general. So you'll be able to know now when your profile configurations are being changed, updated, removed, created, exported, and so on. So if you now decide to take this profile and just export it from your environment, you get, again, a zip file. But now when you open the customization, you see that the file has been converted to the latest syntax and that it is equivalent to what you used to have previously. So as a summary for this session, you've seen different things. We've shown you mainly the new promoted action model based on ActionRefs. We've shown you also that you have now the ability to create split buttons, but also define some custom actions pointing to Power Automate flows.
Yeah, and then for client features, now we have scope repeated actions that you can use without promoting an action. We also pinned the home tab by default. Yes, the group has been renamed from process to home, and modern action bar features, and enhanced personalization capabilities, and lastly, the automated conversion of the client customization that Quentin just demoed.
And with this is concluding our session and presentation here. So we'll take questions if you have some. So make sure to get the microphone up. Yeah.
Yes. First of all, it looks nice, the new action bar. But I have a question. You're saying you can do things in one click. How about the keyboard access? You know, the users that are heavy users using it all day, they are complaining from using the mouse all the time to click. Have you done any improvements, or are you thinking about doing any improvements for the action bar to access it from keyboard only?
Right, so the action bar already supports most of the keyboard access. Did you have any problem exactly describing the keyboard issues?
How do you access the action bar and move around in it without using the mouse?
Right, so you can use tab keys to first focus into the action bar. So once you have focus in one of the buttons, you can use arrow
once you have
keys to move
focus,
around.
then you need to have focus first.
Right, right.
Yes, you have not made a shortcut or something that brings you directly to.
Yeah, we don't have that currently.
Okay.
But that's
Suggestion.
good feedback.
Yeah, but nice.
Any more questions? No. We can maybe throw this one. Who was it? Was he? Okay. Yeah.
Are there any options to, at runtime, change the action bar? So to help the user only see the actions suitable for the current state of the record.
So you have the ability to define some variables that would control some of the properties on the actions themselves. Then for the ActionRefs, they are very simple, and we do not allow you there to have some conditional expressions. But since the visibility of the ActionRef is defined by the visible property on the ActionRef and the one on the base action, you can have then some controls on changing your action bar layout at runtime on the repository side, but also on the promoted side using those.
Okay.
Yeah, I see one question over there. Yeah.
I think that will be the last question, and then we'll be available for you after.
I have a question regarding the callback from the control add-ins, the new one.
Yeah.
That's only thrown for errors that occur during the queuing, not any errors that occur in the AL code, right?
Right. So that is also used for the when it's ignored and error from the callback. Yes, I believe.
From the code as well. So do I get any information which error was thrown?
No, I think you just get a callback, but it doesn't tell you which error occurred, I believe. So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think if you have more questions, we'll take them after the next session or ask them directly through the app. Thank you.